Hey, hi, hello, welcome to episode 34. That's the right number of Trail Society, brought to you by our friends over at Freetrail. I'm Corrine Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
And it is atmospheric rivering, deluging outside in both Portland and Seattle. I think it's snowing.
It's snowing here. Yeah.
In Boulder. How's the snow affecting kind of final ultra trail Cape Town 100-mile prep, Hill?
It's mostly affecting me emotionally and maybe a little bit more stress added to the situation. It's just more problem solving, like, them figuring out a place to run. My long run this past weekend, all of it was in snow. So, super specific for that supposed, couple beach stretches that apparently I'm going to be running on. So, just trying to adapt and not go crazy. And
honestly, snow to sand isn't that's honestly maybe some of the best prep.
Yeah.
It's very similar.
Temperature, not specific.
Yeah.
Ground feel.
No, I know. Ground feel.
Get some sauna in.
Yep.
I feel like sauna is good for training adaptation, but also really good for the mind.
Yes, totally. I agree. I think that's something I'm going to be doing, especially this weekend. Mostly it's going great. It's just, maybe just some extra freakouts and some tears.
What? Hilly having a freak out? Never.
I
was trying to tell her the hay's almost all in the barn. It basically is in the barn anyway.
I don't like that. Almost all, basically.
It's basically in the barn. You have one more long run?
It's like
you're fine.
You're not getting any benefits from it. You're getting a lot of mental benefits from it. And you're getting some neuromuscular stimulation. You're not getting any fitness at this point.
No,
you're
exactly.
Just trying to get to the start line healthy at this point. Yep. So let us talk you off whatever ledge, cliff, mountainside you find yourself on right now.
Thanks. Right now it's a sledding hill. Haha. Okay.
Keely, I feel like your training is looking pretty, I don't want to say normal because that's, I don't know, not a loaded term, but it's what is normal. My normal is very different right now, but it seems like training's going really well. And I'm just kind of wondering if that's got 2023 gears turning at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm finally running consistent back-to-back mileage weeks, which is really fun, and some workouts, which is nice and very humbling. It's like quite the roller coaster coming back to fitness, where you have some workouts where you're like, all right, I haven't lost anything, I'm a crusher. And then you have some other workouts you're like, and I'm really out of shape, I don't know what's going on. So it's kind of a whirlwind, but I feel like, I definitely, I am signing up hopefully very soon for Black Canyon's 100K.
Heck yeah. I'm hoping to be out there to either crew some folks or to maybe run the 60K. I don't know if I'm actually going to be in a place where that is feasible at that point. I would really like it if it was, but that's, I went for a run today. I'm up to 30 minutes. It's still broken up into chunks, but I ran 30 minutes today in 3-minute intervals. And on the last one, I was like, oh, that's my adductor. Stop it. And it's feels totally fine walking. I can get on my horrible bike trainer that I love so much and sweat out intervals, and that feels fine. But yeah, I'm I just texted my PT being hi, tell me I'm fine. So tis the injured life, right?
Well, yeah. And it's so hard to know at this point, because when you're coming back from an injury that you've had multiple times of the very similar region, it's so easy to be oh my God, I feel this here. I feel this here. And sometimes it is valid, but sometimes it's also probably a little bit exacerbated, and it's not really there as much as you feel it is. But you're running by yourself and you're doing something new and you don't quite trust yourself yet. And all of a sudden you're like, this is real. It's so bad. And it's maybe it's not. Just talk to your PT, get some other opinions.
Yeah. So not freaking out yet, but I'm going to, instead of running on today's Thursday, instead of running on Saturday, I'll try for another little run on Sunday type of thing. Nice. So just give myself an extra 24 hours of chill.
Yeah. And
that's all it's about. Yeah.
Right.
Shifting.
And you can still be trajectory up, it just might be a little bit of this along the way.
Yeah. I hate the nonlinear nonsense, but
always what it is. That's literally the one
fight it.
The consistent thing about any injury is it's not linear. It's always just like this. It's always a roller coaster.
Yeah. Join our roller coaster, guys. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, join our roller coaster. Before we jump into some results, and we're not going to cover everything, but we're going to cover some cool things. We have to give a big shout out to Athletic Greens. I've really enjoyed getting to use them kind of throughout the back half of this year. and it's actually been really cool diving in more to some of the other stuff they have been doing. They're not only are they safe for sport certified, but they are actually climate neutral certified as well, meaning that with every AG purchase, they also purchase carbon credits and support projects protecting old growth rainforests, which is a really, really big deal right now. And then additionally, for every purchase, they donate to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the US. So those dollars not only purchase that delicious AG, or maybe not so delicious, depending on kind of like what your lawn clippings taste like, maybe. The money is going to a good place as well. So if you would like to try Athletic Greens, you want to give it a try, you can get a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/trail society. Again, that's over at athleticgreens.com/trail society to take ownership over your health and pick up an ultimate daily nutritional insurance bit to powder today.
Our loved one companies we work with also stand for other good causes.
Right?
Yeah. Great.
It's awesome.
It makes me feel good, for sure. I guess I put news first. Let's do news and then we'll do results.
Let's do it.
Sounds great.
Okay. News pretty light this week. I'm sure something will come out between when we're recording this on Thursday and when this comes out next week. But Ironman 70.3 champs happened recently in St. George, Utah. I kind of got the heads up that the live broadcast was free in the middle of the women's race. It was free on Outside TV, which was really, really cool. And interestingly, something that they did here, they also did at Kona this year, in which the men and women raced on different days, which meant that the live coverage was dedicated to each field, right? i.e., they weren't trying to find the women's race while the men's race was going on and vice versa. So it was really cool that when you signed on to watch the feed of the event, it wasn't cutting to, there was cutting to commercials because that's how free broadcasts have to happen. But they weren't, we didn't lose the women's race in the men's race. And I really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was really cool. And then I guess
I wish I would have known about that.
I know, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really, really cool. I actually didn't watch the men's race because that was on Saturday and I was doing other things versus I got to watch it while I worked on Friday. Other really cool thing that happened at 70.3 championships in St. George was the first Afghan woman competed at 70.3 world champs for the first time ever. Her name is Zainab Razazi, and at just 27 years old, became the first Afghan woman to race in the championship field. She finished with just 1 minute to spare in 8:28:57. In comparison to the women's winner of the race, ran biked and swam just over 4 hours. But really, really cool to kind of see this historic feat happen at the championships. And as part of her training and racing efforts, she's been raising money for She Can Try, which makes sure that more women and girls can follow in her footsteps. It was a really, really cool story. And I appreciated that coming through in one of my email newsletters this past week. And then I think the other bit of news before we dive into results was more kind of stuff coming out of women's soccer. I was at a pub the other night, watching the Phillies play with one of our friends, and we were like, okay, which Seattle women's sports events are we going to go see this next year? Okay, we're going to go see the Seattle Storm. Okay, we're going to go see the Ole Reign. How are we going to make this happen? And kind of in that same vein, women's soccer, FIFA just put out a kind of bit of information about kind of the advancements within particularly, I guess, sponsorship of women's leagues and women's events over the past year. And so basically the data that came out of it said that women's leagues title sponsorships went up, i.e. how if a women's league had a title sponsorship, they got counted in this. And in the past year that went up 11%. So now 77% of all women's professional soccer leagues have a title sponsor. So that's grown. Additionally, broadcast revenue and securing broadcast revenue grew from 9 to 10 leagues. So another league was able to secure having broadcast of their events. And then they also showed in this most recent report that revenue growth is happening in the sport, with 7% of clubs generating more than 1 million from match day broadcast, commercial, and prize money sources. So women's soccer on the up and up. There was another stat that just came out actually, because tickets for 2023 World Cup play has gone on sale, and they didn't understand the demand for the women's tickets, like tickets for the Women's World Cup, and they like totally botched it, it sounds like. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets cleared up. But it was like a kind of like a, oh duh, like people want to go watch this thing. And it sounds like they might have messed up ticket allocation for the upcoming, I think it's 2023 for the Women's World Cup.
Yeah. And this kind of reminds me of a conversation I had this week about the sports retail market in general, and how a lot of big companies over the past, half of a decade, so about the past 5 years, have really started targeting female athletes a lot, because they realize women have a ton of spending power when it comes to households as well. And so I wonder, as companies are willing to start promoting more and more female sports, and more female sports are getting more airtime and all this stuff, if it's a non-linear increase, because the spending power already is in the hands of the women. And I wonder if that will help expedite this even more than it would be otherwise. I don't know. Just a thought I had.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some economist is going to run the numbers on that one for us.
Please do get back to me, because I don't know what I'm talking about, but
no, I think you're totally on the right track. I mean, that's definitely it. I think women also they shop more too, traditionally. So it's and culturally, I guess, it's in the United States. So
I think that's absolutely why those NIL name, image, likeness sponsorships are doing so much better in women's NCAA sports than in men's NCAA sports for that reason. I think Air Jordan, the brand, just signed an 18 or 19-year-old to an NIL contract, which is a huge, apparently a very, very big deal. I think it's their first NIL sponsorship under that brand title. There was another one too, just when I feel the news coming out of women's sports as far as companies tagging professional athletes in tennis and soccer and in collegiate sports as kind of the face and name of their brand is on the rise. And that is incredibly cool to see. Come on, trail and ultra running. Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. So we got some results before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the show today. We are recording this. I guess the first thing I'll say is that we're recording this ahead of World Mountain and Trail Running Championships. Okay. This is Thursday. Those kick off on Friday. There's going to be a ton of cool results. We are cheering our faces off over here stateside. Leah Yingling's husband, Mike, has been feeding me photos for Freetrail. It's been really, really fun to get those up online. It's the inaugural event of them combining kind of trail and mountain world champs all together. It's so cool. And actually, today, the interview that you're going to hear in a little bit is with one of the Team USA athletes, Adam Mary. So we'll touch more on that in a little bit, but we just want to let you guys know that we are recording this ahead of those races taking place this weekend. So go Team USA. We're cheering for you. Super, super loud. But what happened most recently, I guess Golden Trail World Series finals in Madeira, and then Javelina 100. I feel are the two big ones that were just in my face. Really cool races, really cool results. Yeah. I mean, there are obviously some other ones, but yeah, I feel these ones take the cake. The Golden Trail World Series being, a 5-day stage race to finish, which is pretty cool. Yeah. It was a cool
but
format.
I'm so confused of the format. I feel obviously Ninke crushed it and won the majority of the stages, but clearly the stages towards that end were not weighted as heavily as the races in the series.
Yeah. So Ninke Brinkman won many of the Golden Trail World Series kind of summer races. But then the 5-day stage race was kind of there were points awarded over the course of the 5-day stage race that then would get added to your best 3 results from the summer. And so Ninke and Remy came in with a buttload of points, just all the points possible, I think, because, Remy ran away with the 5-day series as well. I think he won 4 or 5 stages. He didn't win the 6K flat stage, and that was it. Versus on the women's side, I feel there was a lot more mixing it up. Allie Mack was really it was the Allie Mack show. I think
she won 2 out of the 5, right?
Yeah, despite landing and she didn't start one of the stages, which is another confusing part of this 5-day stage race where you didn't have to start every stage.
So, I mean, to give a bit of background too. So Greg Valet, so one of the Salomon athlete managers, he comes from a background of professional cycling. And so I think for this 5-day stage race and final, he kind of mimicked some of the things that you see from cycling in the final itself. And even to back up even further, this whole series is kind of comes off of the Sky Running World Series, which is still existing, but the Golden Trails has like a little bit more oomph now because it's some different distances from short distances all the way up to ultras, right? And so you have these different series, these races that have been kind of starred as some of the Golden Trail Running Series races that qualify you for the finals. So once you reach the finals with all your points, then you can then basically in this final stage race, there's 5 races, but you only have to compete in 3 of them. And in each stage race, there's actually an award given for fastest downhiller, fastest climber, and then the winner of the race. So you get different points
and a sprint.
From that.
There's like a sprint segment in the race too. Like
exactly.
There's money on the line for all of it. And then I think the top 10 get paid out pretty well at the end of it. So if maybe you only raced 2 instead of 3 races during the summer, like you're going to come in a little bit behind, but you can move up into the top 5 during this versus coming in and trying to hold on or maintain that spot.
And this all comes from like the cycling thing with like, even during the stages, right? Like we've had this in the gravel cycling too. I'm sure like Steven, your husband, Corrine, can like corroborate this too, but there's different, like literally you can win a crown. Like this is also in speed goat. 50K.
Yeah, we call them preems. Like
exactly. So you can win money for like winning a certain segment. Now you can kind of run that risk if you want to win that segment, if you think you're good at it versus the whole race, but they're still awarded points.
Yeah, it's like the king of the mountain, right? Yeah. In the tour, I think is kind of what people will most relate to.
Got it. So for example, Ninke came in having crushed 3 of the Golden Trail Series races previously in the summer. So she came in with a ton of points. Yep. And so, while she still needed to do well during those stage races, it wasn't as important for her, but Allie Mack came in with not very many points.
Yeah,
and rallied her way into the top 10 basically through this series final basically, because Allie Mack ended up hanging on to 9th, which is sweet. Sophia Lockley was another U.S. gal, got 2nd, and then
because she crushed some series races too, right? Like it was
exactly
so cool. So
very
I like
cool
this
series
format. It's cool.
It's kind of bonkers. And there's some actually, if you don't follow yet, Matt Walsh's newsletter. Is it called Trail Mix or something of that nature? He really looks at the media side of the sport, and his post this past week that came out was all about the Golden Trail World Series. And it was super interesting kind of looking at historically how it came about, and actually the kind of the bridge there with Sky Running, and actually how brands had signed on for Golden Trail World Series. But then there was a conflict with the Sky Running World Series, and brands were worried that if they left for Golden Trail, it would screw up their pre-existing relationships with these sky running races. And a lot of them were already in 3-year contracts with specific sky running races. And so it ended up being, that is part of the reason why Salomon is like the primary sponsor and the primary pusher of the Golden Trail World Series, is because like brands had come on and then kind of panicked due to like pre-existing relationships within the sky running world.
Right. And I mean, there has been conflicts. I mean, transparent, like definitely there were contracts where now, I mean, you see the popularity of the sky running races, not as much, because traditionally a lot of the Salomon top athletes in Europe, especially where there's a lot of Salomon team presence, would go to the sky running races for the VK. Like that's how Remy Bonnet got really his start, was in the sky running World Series. He would 100%. win the VK World Series. And then so Greg Valet, I think, had that idea, but then he wanted a little bit more control over it, I think, from his athletes. So that's why you see a lot of the Salomon athletes targeting the Golden Trail Running Series as opposed to Sky Running Series now.
Yeah, that sponsorship conversation is super interesting, and this is something we should deep dive into one day. But it's like, why aren't more of the best athletes at Trail Worlds? If we look at why isn't Jim Walmsley there? Why isn't Killian there? Why isn't Courtney there, et cetera? And some of that comes down to brand pressure, right? Like because it's under the national governing bodies of USA Track and Field, or or whatever country you're in from, it mostly falls under like the IAAF. And so it's like your brands are like, well, you're going to go run in Nike apparel at a race that's maybe not on our bucket list for the season. Yeah. And so there are also a lot of pressures there.
But there's also not that much funding. I mean, for athletes to actually get there from USA,
USATF.
USATF. Exactly. There's not that much money to
and
get
I don't think
this
isn't unique to trail running either. Like I think for a while, track and field athletes and marathon athletes didn't necessarily choose to try to get on Team USA for certain world events either.
Because of that. Yeah. Because it's a lot. It's
exactly.
A lot of self-funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's, and most of the funding that they do get goes to like paying for that ticket because like they're not easy places to get to oftentimes. And if they can allocate $1,000 or $1,500, you're going to eat that up with your travel budget pretty easily.
Maybe we should talk to Joe Gray about this. He's been on many teams.
Yeah, he can tell us all about it. But that's also a reason why I think I brought it up when we talked about the team naming, like why Max King hasn't been on some of these teams, because the focus with Solomon was not on worlds in a pretty like strong way. And so I think it'll be interesting, but still cool to keep an eye on. The other big race that happened that I think all of us are so freaking excited about was Javelina 100 outside of Phoenix, golden ticket race on US soil. Really good racing too, like really, really awesome races, good live coverage, good live broadcast. And a lot of our friends were racing. And I think the text I've sent to so many people is like, what a perfect, like what a great, like 4 golden tickets to be given out. Like it gave me all the warm, fuzzy feelings. So Dakota Jones, Jonathan Rea,
woohoo!
Men's race took first and second, took the golden tickets. Dakota's got his entry to Western States, broke the course record, ran 12:58.
Right.
Like,
and I loved reading his post. It's like running that fast, right? He was running this fast. He didn't know if it was sustainable. And then like, he actually like felt good the last lap. It is so cool.
It was cool too, because he and John were like
going
kind
back
of like
and forth, and John caught him on this, basically the 4th lap. And so then in the 5th, I think he left the aid station before him. And then Dakota kind of like put down the hammer, but actually I'm going to, this is going to be published after the fact. I'm literally after this going to a surprise dinner party for John. He thinks he's just meeting me and his wife, but it's going to be a bunch of people there. Yeah. We're excited because I run with John. He's my training partner on his easy days.
That guy is so fit and fast. It's kind of wild.
Was that his first 100 mile?
No,
he ran Western.
He got a golden ticket to Western last year.
I don't know why I don't know who this person is.
He was a dark horse favorite.
He got the course record at Bandera this year. That's how he got into Quad Rock. Also, he raced Drew Holman.
He finished just ahead of Drew in that race. Yeah, he races predominantly in Colorado. Western States is kind of one of his. Bandera and Western States were kind of like his push outside of there. He works in the environmental sector and was like, why would I travel out of state when I can race here? But he told me after Western States, I had to find him a pacer because all of his pacers either weren't fit enough to pace him or had other things come up. And so Elon Liebner in the Bay Area jumped in to pace him and paced him for 30 miles or something.
Did he finish Western States?
He did. He finished in 14th. He was in the top 10, fighting for top 5, leaving kind of Green Gate area and just was overheating in a bad way, kind of on Cal Street, and just finished strong, but not.
I mean, Western States is such a learning race. It makes total sense.
So his little cousin though was like, we're going back to Western States next year, right? And he's like, I guess we're going back to Western States.
Because he's originally from California. So his family was able to go for there. But so John, I mean, it's been cool to I've been training with him for a couple of years now because we have the same coach, Adam. And it's been cool to see the hard work pay off. But then also on the women's side, holy crap, I was so excited to see Devin win.
Oh my gosh,
she ran such a
new
smart
Masters
race.
Record too.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she ran so patient all day.
So patient, right? And with the recent, kind of the up and down health stuff this whole summer, her kind of Devin Yanko DIY slam falling apart and officially getting a lupus diagnosis. Because I had known previously that she'd been given a latent lupus diagnosis, and that was actually a misdiagnosis. So she's been dealing with this for a long time, but not really knowing what it was. Kind of these health flares and stressful in stressful moments of time have definitely been probably all linked to this to lupus that she's had this whole time. And so I think mentally she just went in being like, you know what, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do my own race. And like, it paid off in a big way. Like Heather Jackson went hard off the front in her first ever 100-mile race. And that ran a great 100, like ran faster than I've ever run before. But ultimately I think finished 5th, maybe. We'll see her get a golden ticket at some point, I am certain. But yeah, huge shout out to Devin Yanko. Second fastest time ever on the course, broke her previous time. So she PR'd her old course record, got broke by Camille Herron last year. Devin ran faster than her old course record. And I got the Masters course record. Like just so cool.
Hell yeah.
Heck
so
yeah.
Cool.
I want to swear
second place.
Oops, sorry.
I want to swear a lot. I want to say all the F bombs right now.
What
second
the
place,
French toast. That's what I say.
But second place, super cool story. Someone that we're actually going to talk to on the podcast in not too long. Riley Brady, second place, ran also a super smart race and like closed really hard actually in like the last lap and a half. Non-binary athlete, lives on the East Coast, crewed and paced Ellie Pell at Western States last year. That's where I met them. We'd reached out to Riley to do an interview with them ahead of Javelina, didn't quite work out with timing. And I was texting Ellie while they were racing, being like, Ellie, we're going to get in line. Like Riley's going to be a hot commodity, but we're really looking forward to getting to have a conversation with them and just think it's really cool. The race they threw down was brilliant. And I think it's amazing that we've got some non-binary representation going into Western States.
Yeah. And one thing that I got put on my radar the other day, I was talking to Ryan Montgomery, who we had on last week's episode. If you guys hadn't heard that one, check that one out. But he brought up the fact that he had talked to Riley and heard from either them or someone else that some of the other ladies in the race were unaware that Riley was in the female category. And so he said it was like just highlighting another issue that, you know, Javelina did offer this non-binary category, but they didn't necessarily, you know, make it clear right away that the person could still be in their gender.
Yeah. And so actually Javelina has come out and said, like, Riley reached out to us ahead of time. You can Riley reached out to Javelina in advance and said, hi, on Ultra Sign Up, I can elect my gender. I am non-binary. I've elected that I am non-binary, but I want to be in contention for a golden ticket in the women's field for this race. And then it sounds like the tracker couldn't figure, like the tracking and timing system couldn't differentiate those two things. And so they were listed in the non-binary category. It's not that they changed genders in the middle of the race, that they should have been in that category the entire time.
Totally. So just another little boo-boo, but
yeah, no, races are learning. We're learning. The commentators were learning as the race was happening in real time. But yeah, super, like I'm thrilled, super excited. Rest of the women's field ran really superb races. Good to see Nicole Bitter and Casey Lichtig run really solid races, finishing 3rd and 4th in their races. Heather Jackson again finishing 5th. Like, I think a lot of the top 10 women's field ran some of the top 10 fastest times in history.
I think they were top 5 or something. Like they were close to the top 5 toppest times or something.
Yeah,
something crazy. Yeah,
very, very solid. And then 100K race happened. Both actually, Scott Trayer and Lottie Brinks set the 100K course records during the weekend. Lottie Brinks broke Courtney DeWalter's 2016 100K course record.
It's pretty sweet.
That's fast. And finished second overall. Scott was the only person that beat Lottie in that race, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then old Pacific Northwester Sarah Ostowalski was 3rd. So it was like first place was a guy, 2nd and 3rd were ladies.
Heck yeah.
So
and then
cool.
UTMB Mexico and Puerto Verde happened as well. I don't know what went on
Ellie, you
there.
were about to raise that.
All I can say is I dodged a major bullet and everything is crossed. The Ultra Trail Cape Town isn't like that.
Inaugural races, man, they are loose.
Not always.
Here's the thing. Like, it'd be one thing, like, I've heard mixed reviews from the races in Mexico. Some people who were super upset by what happened out there. Some people who were like super into how hard it was, a little bit of both. It's like, and races can be hard. I am all about that. But it's like, you got to know going in what you're getting yourself into. And that seems to be the big limiting factor here. Like there was route finding, bushwhacking, like people were getting off course. There were aid station issues. There were crewing issues. I
think it's like speaks to like safety, right? Yeah. Like things, right? Like it's fine if there's a little bit of like disorganization with the first time event, like to be expected, right? You're learning, but I agree. If it's like maybe a safety issue, seems not cool. My friend Anthony,
Anthony Lee.
Anthony Lee, he got fourth. He was like so wrecked. I saw a picture of him like getting wheeled by like the luggage cart into his room after the race because he was so wrecked. But it took him 26 hours to do it. And he was fourth.
Like the winning women's time
36.
36 hours or something like that. That's brutal.
Wow.
I know. And Kat Bradley was second with 37:15. And she said she got off course, but like
I think everyone sounds like they did.
Anthony said he saw a jaguar out there. I don't know. I mean,
crazy. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess we've heard of some of the bad stories, but let's hear about the good ones too. So send us
if you
DMs
ran it,
you actually had a really good time because could have been.
Yeah, I think the vacation aspect pre and post race was pretty like deluxe from folks that are still like I have a friend who's like not yet back yet because they're just vacationing after the race. And I'm okay, that sounds delightful. Like a little like it's rainy in the PNW, go to Mexico for another week.
I wish I was there.
Yeah, I know. At the surprise party for John, Anthony's going to be there. I'm going to get the full recap. So next episode, we'll get some insider.
Okay, so before we dive into the meat and potatoes, we got to give a shout out to the feed again. Thank you all for buying waffles. Not that like waffles is supposed to be the specific plug going on here, but I keep getting tagged in Instagram stories of waffle purchases. So I'm influencing someone or something anyway, but you too can go and put together a snack box. You can get, 800 gels in a specific flavor. You can buy recovery equipment, whatever you want. And you can get $15 in-store credit for your first order if you go to thefeed.com/Trail Society. There, again, you can claim or climb, I guess, a free $15 to spend on whatever you would like. Did anyone try anything new with this last month's box? Anything new and exciting? Or are we still like Joji bars and waffles for forever?
I mean, all of that stuff for forever. I'm actually trying some new stuff just because, specifically for electrolytes, because it's going to be a lot. It's going to be hot in my race in Cape Town, or the potential to be. So I'm trying Humagel Plus. It has some extra electrolytes in there. They've got some cool flavors, strawberry lemonade and pomegranate berry. Some really good ones. Guys, don't buy my pomegranate berry. It's like literally out of stock. And I think I got the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you find you really like something specific like me, and you're just on the waffle train for life, you can like put together a subscription box where once every 2 weeks, every month, you can get sent this thing with your specific snacks. Maybe it's Humo electrolyte gel added to gels, or it's whatever, but you can do that too. So I like the options there to play with.
That gives you a discount if you make it monthly.
Totally. The other one I really like that I've been trying is Endurance Tap. It's a new brand that they just brought on, and it's from Canada. It's basically just like maple syrup.
Maple syrup shots for the win.
And one has caffeine in it.
And maple syrup shots. I think this is the winning.
It's perfect. That's what you need for your waffles. You need some syrup before. And there's one with caffeine in it. Oh my God, it's perfect. It's
caffeinated maple syrup is next level. Okay. We got to go to the meat and potatoes though. We'll talk about waffles another time. We will. Okay. If you haven't listened to our interview with Ryan Montgomery yet, I suggest you go do it. But today we are bringing you another interview as kind of part of our diversity, equity, inclusion series of sorts. We'll see how long we can keep this going. Maybe forever, maybe forever and ever. But our next guest is Adam Merry. Adam Merry is an elite multiracial trail runner and lifelong athlete. He started trail running in 2017 and has since raced its distances on the road and trail up to 100K. He's on the 80K Worlds team right now. He's based in Golden, Colorado, but is originally from Monterey, California. And we get to hear a little bit more about his childhood there. Adam currently coaches athletes and uses his background in diversity, equity, and inclusion to help bring light to some of the issues within the trail and ultra running community and industry. But we're going to let Adam explain all that in his own words and dive into the interview.
My name is Adam Merry. I'm a professional trail runner based in Boulder, Colorado. I live here with my wife and 4 pets, and I like to cook for one of my hobbies. Growing up in California was a really awesome experience for me throughout my childhood and kind of early adulthood. I grew up in Monterey, California, which is Central Coast, and it's kind of a melting pot. Like there's all different types of diversity of all kinds, like sports interest, recreation interests. Diving is a big thing there, like scuba diving and stuff, and ocean conservation. But there's, a rich sporting culture in California. There's so much density of competition. So that was like a really fun aspect of growing up, competing in sports. But yeah, I mean, I guess the one big difference that I don't really miss so much is there's not really distinct seasons in Central Coast California. So it's kind of like temperate all the time, like 50 to 65. So the good thing, I guess, was I was able to like recreate outside like pretty much all year. And so you can play team sports all year. You can, if you're into like skateboarding or, doing stuff like that, like you can do that all year round, which I don't know, I found really fun. I I definitely think I pulled in the directions I was interested in from a sporting and athletic context. Both of my parents were always like really supportive of kind of whatever I was interested in, be it, athletics related or not. And so I really had a lot of like freedom growing up to pursue whatever sports I was interested in at the time. So I kind of did like everything, like I was on like a travel competitive soccer team. I was in the Bronco World Series for baseball. Like I was like that into these different things. And then I'd like kind of switch and be into a different thing. Like in high school, I was really into football. And I played in college as well. I had a little like brief foray into competitive track and field in middle school. That was like very painful. And then I was kind of up out of that after one season. And then I got back into it in high school on our high school track and field team. But yeah, I feel really lucky that my parents didn't really have an agenda for me as to like what they wanted me to pursue athletically. It was really up to me. And I do feel like having that diverse like athletic background, and I know it's different for everyone. And this is probably also like largely genetic for me, but I didn't like weightlift super early in my childhood. And I had all these different kind of like functional movement, like strengthening things that I would do in different activities. And so I'm like very durable. It's one of my kind of like superpowers as a trail runner now is like, I don't get injured ever, like in terms of like a overuse injury or a bone density thing or anything like that. So of course I roll my ankles like everybody else now and then, but I think that diverse sporting background early in my childhood like helped set me up for that. In terms of like why I chose the sports that I did growing up or kind of where I gravitated, I think there probably is definitely an intersection with race there for me. Like Monterey, California is like a fairly diverse, but definitely like predominantly white community. And same thing for the high school I went to, Stevenson School. It was predominantly white and very, very minority Black. But I was always like, because of that, like, kind of a well-rounded athlete background in my childhood, when I got to like middle school and high school, I had been jumping and running so much in my childhood that I was just naturally like, good at jumping high and sprinting and that kind of stuff. And so I naturally gravitated toward basketball. I used to be really into that. Football, track. And I think too, there's like this probably subconscious narrative or like, cultural norming, at least within like Black households, of like what sports are kind of normal or like for us, for lack of a better word. And so those are all like examples, football, track, basketball. And so I guess part of it too is like what I loved watching sports as well growing up. And, like a lot of the athletes in those sports are Black. And so, like I excelled in those sports. I saw myself represented on TV for those sports. And so I think that was all part of it. Being multiracial, it's super weird because I never felt like I really belonged in either the white or the Black community. It's always been something, to be honest, that I've like struggled with and has been much more alienating and painful than you might expect. Like, when you have a more homogenous racial identity, you, despite any kind of like systems of oppression you might encounter or difficulties you might face because of your lack of racial privilege, you are part of a group, like, so if you're Black, you have that Black community. If you're Asian, you have that community, and so on and so forth. Same for white folks. I actually was reflecting on this recently. There were some really key figures in my schooling that were part of like the administrative staff, particularly like one Black woman who just, it's funny, like I always felt like she understood me and we were like friends, and she like looked out for me for some reason. But, reflecting on it as an adult, it's like, man, she really like saw that I was one of the only like Black kids at the school and like went out of her way to make herself a resource for me. I always took it for granted as a child, but looking back on it, like I was so lucky to have that. At Stevenson School, one of the premier like sporting activities are like golf and water polo. And those were like, first of all, for golf, like, golfing's like pretty expensive, not unlike trail running to a certain extent. It's like, oh, all you need is like a set of clubs and you can, but it's like, yeah, but not really, there's like, what about golf lessons? Cause like almost everyone kind of sucks when they first start. And so I like didn't have access to those kinds of things. Like it's really expensive to have that as a child. And I just never did. And so, and I certainly didn't see myself represented on those teams. Like they're pretty much all white or Asian on the golf teams. And same with water polo. And so that, I just didn't like gravitate toward those because it was like, I don't have the foundation to even like, show up and be decent. I think that the kind of fundamental like interest in trail running and being like deep in nature was something that I started to like kind of interact with early on in my childhood. I was in Boy Scouts. And so I was like all the way from, I think like Tiger Cub is like the earliest, version of that. And so from a very young age, I was like hiking and backpacking and going on camping trips. I was really lucky that the Boy Scout troop I was a part of was like super diverse. So like lots of multiracial kids, Black kids. The Scout masters were even like mixed race. And so I don't know that was because I got to choose like the Scout troop I joined. There was like several that I could choose from. And I just like gravitated toward that one for one reason or another. And so I guess I felt more a part of that community because we would get out and do like badass stuff. Like we would, did this 10-day backpacking trip through New Mexico and at Philmont Scout Ranch and like all this stuff. But we were, the Scout troop I was a part of was kind of like, we normed like that we showed up as we were. And like, we kind of had a reputation for, not always playing by the rules in terms of like when you were at different camps and stuff, and just like to have a good time. And so I think that was part of why it was so easy to feel like I belonged in those spaces, like outdoors, backpacking and at scout camps and stuff. I would like run with my backpacking backpack on down a mountain because it was fun. But I wasn't really exposed to the idea of trail running even at all until after college. So it's just like, you don't know what you don't know. Like I didn't even know it was a possibility or certainly didn't think it was a sport. And so it was really just after college when I was kind of rock climbing and like, that I don't know if either or any of you have experienced it, but finding how you are active as an adult when there's no more like team sports structure, at least like, within the academic context. So I think it was during that period of like dabbling in different things like rock climbing and road cycling and stuff that I found trail running through one of my good friends. He just asked if I wanted to go on a trail run. And it sounded like so weird because it was like, what do you mean kind of thing. But it was just like a love at first experience, if you will. Like the first time I did it, I was just like, wow, this is so fun. And I was wearing like Nike Freeze and basketball shorts and totally didn't have the right stuff. I didn't even have water or anything, but I learned pretty quickly, as all of us do, how to succeed and excel in what you need to do to do trail running.
I thought it was really interesting listening to Adam talk about, sports that were logical for him to gravitate towards. Not that he was pushed or pulled or forced into any one thing, but, that truthfully, like the role models that he had, the people he looked up to, the people who looked like him were in football and basketball and baseball, right? They weren't in water polo or tennis or golf quite as much. And so I thought that was really interesting. And just, not having an experience like that, it like created a lot of pause for me as far as like, how do I feel about that? Have I experienced anything like that remotely in my life? And I'm wondering if either one of you have ever felt, either drawn to something because of representation or because of a specific role model, or felt really out of place in any one, be it career or school or sport in your life.
Yeah. I have a couple examples. I think one in particular was, I was always just a bit more like sporty. I had an older sister growing up and she was just into different things than me. And so I always I gravitated towards things I was interested in, like playing sports with the boys at recess. And that's kind of where I made my friends. But I almost didn't like feel, because there weren't like many people who were like me. So I always gravitated towards like the other girls that were a bit more sporty like me as well. But then it also, I felt that way when I was kind of, it's less so now, but even getting into trail running, right? Like there have been women who've led the way. And I think those women, specifically for me, it was Anna Frost and Emily Forsberg, who I could see myself in them. Not only that they were a woman, but they also looked like me. I felt like I was like, I could relate to them more. So that really, I think that's actually really powerful. I think that does matter. In the other space, I'm sure Keely and you, Corrine, too, can relate to it. It was just in chemistry. I majored in chemistry and in college, and I was like the only woman in my advanced organic chem class.
Very male dominated industry.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And I feel like I can definitely relate to feeling like an outsider, but I don't think I have any experience that puts me in his shoes at all. So I don't think I'll comment on that. But I do think that I was very lucky in the sense that as I grew up, like in the sports that I played, I saw direct role models. Like there was a girl that looked dirty blonde hair, was like 6 feet tall, went to the neighboring school and went and played Division I basketball at Penn State. Like it was identical one for one. Like, oh, can I be that person? Okay, cool. I can. They are right there. And I feel like I took that for granted, right? To be able to have someone that's just so relatable that you have like a very concrete someone to look after. And I think Adam talks about this a lot in the sport of trail running specifically, where, that representation isn't there. And now as we're seeing maybe a little bit more representation come on, we actually have to be wary about that visual or that representation, because there's something that is called tokenism in the sport that he'll dive into for us. That's really, where brands are maybe showcasing these different ethnicity groups just for profit, or just to showcase that they are supporting this group without actually putting money behind it.
Without actually supporting it.
Mm-hmm. So Adam's going to talk us through tokenism and then how he's kind of, navigated the trail and ultra scene as both a role model and through barriers to his own entry and to the athletes that he works with.
Tokenism in general is just being held up or used as in the racial context, it often comes through virtue signaling for companies or people. And they want to show that, through our marketing materials or whatever, that, we are in support of the Black community or increasing diversity in trail running. And they're using people as tokens of that support, where in reality, perhaps they aren't really, making the financial investments in increasing diversity. It's really just a photo with a Black model. That would be an example of someone being used as a token. Certainly, tokenism has been something that I've had to navigate and kind of consider my entire life, whether it was in an academic setting or friend groups, and professional trail running, and trail running in general is no different. So for me, it's really like case by case. I think I always believe that whether or not I'm being tokenized, I look at each kind of instance or interaction through the lens of like, okay, why ever I'm getting this opportunity, is there a way for me to like raise awareness about racial identity, or create more representation of multiracial Black people in this sport of trail running? And so, to be honest, like oftentimes I've said yes to opportunities to be represented in media or otherwise that I do recognize like is perhaps like perhaps I am being tokenized. There's been instances like in my running career where I'm looking at an opportunity and thinking like maybe this is like tokenism, but it's important for me to create representation. And so if I say no to this shoot where they want to include me for this marketing material, well, then perhaps they choose a white person. And then that's kind of self-defeating for like a lot of what I'm about in terms of trying to increase representation in trail running, racial representation and diversity. So I really take it like case by case. But there's a lot of times too that I just say no because I have a limited amount of energy, emotional and physical energy that I have to give. And so I try to be strategic with like what I say yes to and what I say no to. I think it's really obvious when you're being tokenized or people want to use you, when that's happened to you your whole life, like in different scenarios, like you can just, it's like you read it and you just can see like, oh, they're trying to use me, So, and then you have a decision, like you can either kind of take the opportunity, smile, and like, further what you want to, or you can say no. And that's a totally valid decision as well that I've done many times. So, yeah, but to be honest, Corrine, it's like, I would be lying if I said like, I felt good about that, or like it was, not a big deal. Like it pisses me off. Like oftentimes, like when that happens, it's like really frustrating, and it's it actually ties into like what I would like to encourage folks to do at the end, but it comes from a lack of self-awareness on the end of like the person who's extending this opportunity to you or asking something of you. It comes from a lack of their own like, racial identity awareness or like context about these systems of oppression. And so that's what's frustrating is like, as a minority who's like often not on the privileged end of a lot of these systems, like I've spent a lot of time like doing work like on myself and in, reflecting and going through workbooks and having these kind of very emotionally vulnerable moments, like talking about race, whether it's with people I'm close to or not. Like I used to do DEI and social justice training at my previous job. So I'm having these conversations with white folks, and it's like, that is such a big emotional lift. And so oftentimes when I feel tokenized or folks reach out and like, don't realize the nuance to what they're asking, it is a little bit like triggering in a sense. And yeah, it's all part of it. It's definitely hard to not let the anger like turn into like big time resentment or a like chip on your shoulder that's not productive for yourself, right, and your own like progress and the people around you. So I think lots of folks have that in one way or another in their life and in their different identities. And so I think it's something we all struggle with to a certain extent. So when I first started trail running, which was over 5 years ago now, like, so like not a really long time ago, but it's been a minute. Like, I think, I don't know, apart from the things that are like very obvious, like, hydration packs have gotten a lot more sleek, and, people aren't carrying full size water bottles around all the time. Like, I think, I really do believe that like there is a shift that has happened from like this, this very homogenous, particular type of like middle-aged white guy that's like, that is a trail runner. And there is a lot more, just representation on starting lines in terms of like diversity of age of people participating, a lot more women in the sport, which is really cool. Like, it's just crazy to reflect, like the first trail race I did, like the Woodside Trail Run in California. Like, I don't even know if I remember seeing a woman running like at all, or like on the start line or anything. So it's just like, that has changed a ton. And it's really exciting. And I think, for sure, like in podcast media, definitely podcast media. I was going to say video documentaries, but this is actually not the case. Like, there aren't a lot of video documentaries about, high level runners of color, like not a lot, but these are all like areas that are improving. It's like this is an evolving like thing. And so I've definitely seen it in a pretty short time, like 5 years, like change a fair amount in terms of like physically what it feels like to be at a race, in terms of who's there participating, and certainly in the representation in media, as a fan of the sport. I think taking a leap into the trail world for most people is probably a little intimidating, regardless of your race or identity. But certainly for people of color, like it, you do look at running groups or races or, race photography, and it's like, damn, that's like mostly white people. It's a little bit more scary because you don't see yourself in that. And I'm not going to lie, like it does feel a little bit alienating, a little bit. But the thing I would say that I really, really believe is that, trail running and the fundamental act of like accessing these wild, beautiful places in nature is worth it. It's worth that little bit of discomfort and the periodic, maybe feeling of, maybe in my case, like being tokenized or feeling like the only one on a start line or feeling isolated. It is totally worth it. Like, I will be recreating out in nature in these spaces like forever. And the great thing is like that we're all as a community, like having more and more of these conversations that address these ideas of like racial identity and different identities. And I think there's much more of a willingness to make trail running more inclusive and diverse as a sport. And so that's hopefully going to continue to progress and improve. But even if it stayed just as it is right now, like I'd really encourage anyone listening that's on the fence or even like a little skeptical. It's like the act of trail running in and of itself is worth it. There are barriers still for people of color and people of different socioeconomic privilege, for sure. Like I think for me personally, like when I got into the sport, I was lucky that I had a friend who would just show me around the trails, and I didn't really start like racing. I was just running on the trails in my community. And so the only real barrier there was like literally not knowing like where to go or like how to not get lost, or like, do I carry water with me? Like literally something as simple as that. Or like eating while you run, right? Like that's something a lot of us have learned as we've done trail running more and more. You don't just have to run with no calories, like you eat snacks and stuff. And so a lot of those barriers, I think, are knowledge based. But there are definitely barriers that I know exist for athletes I work with and just friends of mine in the community around access to trails, access to races. There's even some things like systemically that I think most people, you don't even like consider it if it's not your situation, but like, if you like in terms of socioeconomic privilege, for example, like if you're living kind of more paycheck to paycheck, you might be waiting to register for a race until you get paid, and it might fill up, and you're a Black runner that's like, oh man, I was really looking forward to this race because I can't travel to race. This is like the one race nearby me that I can do. Or, I just had a runner recently who's like an up and coming Black runner and he wanted to run at the USATF, like Colorado 25K champs. And it was like, that was your opportunity. And you like missed it because of this stupid like thing, right? Of like, oh, you like were waiting to get paid, then it filled up, then you couldn't get in. And so I think like creating more inclusive systems like that really do just take like creating leadership structures, whether it's like boards or RIDC like has some of these like committees in place, but like resources for race directors that or other organizers that they can use to like really contextualize all of their policies and decision making, so that we can kind of start to tear down and like remove some of those barriers that are unintended but are still blocking people from participating as much as they might like in the sport.
Yeah. So as someone who's, crushing it on the trail and ultra scene, you're a respected coach in our industry, like you've cultivated this platform, and you talked a little bit about seeing yourself represented in football players and basketball players growing up. And I'm wondering what it means to you to know that there are young runners of color out there who see you and see you on podiums and see you at events and see themselves in you and see that, like, what does it mean for them to see that sliver of representation?
Well, it's, representation in trail running of diverse athletes to me is like really important. And I not only try to model that personally, like with my own performance and involvement in the sport, but in my coaching as well. Like I try to support BIPOC athletes and conditionally offer sliding scale pricing and stuff like that for certain athletes. And, to be honest, like I don't hear oftentimes like who is or is not feeling inspired or more included by the representation. It's like the thing about social media, or like when someone snaps a photo of us on a podium, like we don't know what eyeballs that reaches or what the impact of that is. And so it would bring me like so much joy to hear from a young runner, BIPOC or something, that felt like they wanted to try out trail running because of seeing me. Like that is really cool. I've had some adults that's happened to, like at races and stuff like that. Black folks who were like, dang, like I actually started trying this or felt more included at this event because you came up and talked to me. And so it means a lot. It's always those small like acts of kindness or openness between people that, I don't know, I always remember, and I feel like make a lot of the sacrifice and I don't know, the tough days worth it. So it means a lot to me for sure.
So shortly after we recorded that interview, I actually went to listen to Allison Desir talk about her book, Running While Black, which is really, really good. And if you haven't bought it yet, you should go buy it. I wanted to cry at times listening to her book reading. And I asked her about that. She works in the running industry kind of as a disruptor in a lot of ways. And I asked, like how, working as a person myself, working in the running industry, like how can I like balance the dichotomy or juxtaposition of like tokenism versus like the need for visual representation, like racially diverse representation in the sport. And her response totally surprised me, and I think made me feel like I had actionable steps to move forward with. And her advice was that the first time you do it, it's tokenism. The first time you offer, you bring on someone who's racially diverse to a photo shoot, or onto a team, or onto a sponsorship deal or something of that nature. Like it's tokenism. But if you continue to bring that person in, if you continue to give that person or people a seat at the table, if you continue to give them power, it moves away from tokenism to real authenticity and to real representation in the sport. And so initially it's not something that you can necessarily avoid. And I think that to me was the thing. Like I was like, I have to avoid tokenism at all costs. I have to make sure I never put someone in that position. And I think having that intent and that meaning means that you're kind of going into it with the progressive view of eventually you're going to get it right. But it took the pressure off in a way of like knowing that like initially it's going to be tokenism almost no matter what. And by continuing to fight and by continuing to make sure that person is welcome back in, you can actually create this like authentic representation in the sport. And that to me just like blew my mind.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what I've been fighting with for a while through our conversations with Ryan, all the way back to our conversations with Richard, is I don't know how to be the white female who approaches a BIPOC running group and asks them to join forces with mine. It feels very tokenism-ish to me. And so maybe the answer is that I don't avoid that. And the whole point is to embrace that and be okay with it being tokenism initially, because you need to take that first step. And if you don't take the first step, there's never going to be any merging of those two groups. It might feel a little bit superficial at first or a little bit tokeny at first, but then it will evolve into something more genuine. And then the tokenism,
you can't let tokenism scare you, I think is the big thing, because it can be authentic and it can move to something that's truly authentic. Right. And a lot of the like BIPOC and Black organizers within sport and other groups, like that's something that they've always welcomed in a lot of ways too. Like Allison talked a lot about like the Harlem run crew, about how it was never about them. It was about everyone. And it just happened to be like organized initially by the BIPOC community. And I thought that was like, I think we put up that barrier to like bridging that gap because we're afraid of coming off as unauthentic. So we just think to be less scared, I think, and just keep trying.
Yeah. It makes you need to think about doing some like self-reflection on your own, which I feel like Adam talks a lot about in this next section. He talks a lot about how self-reflection can help you be more inclusive in this space and to actually encourage, others to participate, is like learning a lot about yourself and how you identify with different genders and ethnicities. And he is no stranger to introspection. He has this beautiful piece he wrote for Trail Runner magazine where he just goes into the depths of his own mind during a race. And we'll link to that article here in the show notes. And a part of it goes as this, and then we'll transition to the Trail Society episode to have you listen to Adam talk to you through his feelings around this article. When you're deep into an ultramarathon and broken all the way down, do you fight back tears thinking of friends who got caught up, locked up, or passed away and cannot experience the beauty of trail running? Do you dress a certain way to try to seem non-threatening? Let's go and hear from Adam now.
That article I wrote for Trail Runner, describing that internal like monologue or dialogue, sometimes it feels like I have with myself, is like, I don't know, that happens like all the time and has happened for a long time for me. And so I've heard from some that it resonates for them, and it's like really meaningful to get that feedback. But I think what I would suggest, and what would be my recommendation, for anyone listening to this, like regardless of your race or background or anything like that, is, I think we can all acknowledge that there's a lot externally that we can do, like as a trail running community, as race directors, Corrine, everything you said, athletes, friends. But the thing I would ask of anyone listening, if you're interested in contributing or, not sure what you can do, is like engage in some self-reflection. And I'm actually going to hold up this little book I brought. It's been really impactful for me. It's called The Racial Healing Handbook by Dr. Annalise Singh. It's a workbook. And so this is for anyone, like Black, white, anyone, any kind of identity. And it's really helpful to do kind of introspective reflection on your personal relationship with race, particularly. And I think it's only through that real willingness to reflect on your own relationship with race that we can all collectively like have a productive conversation and create solutions that aren't riddled with blind spots. And so that is what I would ask, is like, whether it's the Racial Healing Handbook or a different resource you connect with more, like take that time to like reflect on your own. And then I'm sure that through that self-reflection, like any kind of outreach you might do to try and be an ally to someone, or external kind of systematic change you might make if you're a race director or something like that, will be much more well-informed. I used to work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is a nonprofit in Monterey. Really awesome. If you're in Monterey, you have to go. It's like the best aquarium in the world, in my opinion. But I used to work in technology there. But in my, and at the end, I was like the engineering manager for our exhibits team. But during my tenure of 7 years working there, I think like 5 or 6 years, I was a member of the DEI committee at the aquarium, which was a group of like cross-functional folks there who would meet, I think like every other week, and talk about DEI concepts, content, and look at organizational policies at the aquarium and make recommendations and changes. And so I had like many opportunities to unpack a lot of these racial issues as they show up in the workplace. And then we would also create time for like personal reflection. And I had the experience of spearheading some organizational changes. Like we changed our dress and appearance standard, for example, to be more inclusive and allow people to show up at work as their authentic self rather than having to cover up tattoos or not have, colored hair, things like that. And so that was really like formative experience. And toward the end of my tenure there, when the whole George Floyd moment happened, we actually kind of like bootstrap organized these like racial equity and social justice trainings that the DEI committee that I was a part of actually facilitated. So we, were trained by some professional like experts in that space. And then we facilitated these very vulnerable and emotionally charged conversations around racial identity and social justice for like 5-day workshops for like hundreds of staff. And so, as you can imagine, like that was pretty heavy duty and raw, especially being a person of color, like facilitating those meetings of mostly white people. And so you have to like do the work to be able to facilitate it. And so that's part of where this like racial healing handbook recommendation comes from, is like I found a lot of meaning in that, diving deeper into my own racial identity. And I really found that through watching these, many tens and tens and tens of people like go through these workshops, that like most of the kind of like collective improvement that we made as an institution around like DEI, like competency and awareness and fluency, like acknowledging and bringing race into the picture at work, was around like introspection that we had done in these courses. And so that's why I make that recommendation so strongly, is like we have to like pause and like do the introspection before we can like go to solution mode for how to make these changes at a policy level in trail running. I think a lot of us haven't had the opportunity to like do that because it's still unfortunately like kind of a like early like thing to be doing, like examining your own racial identity. Like 20 years ago, that like wasn't a mainstream thing to do. It's so true that all of these changes like come down to the quality of all of our collective relationships and the willingness and trust to like hold space for one another and like lean in and be vulnerable and say, hey, like I might have like messed up and like said something in a way that impacted you. I didn't mean for that to happen. Like, I'm so sorry, or whatever, right? Like there's all of these big changes we're talking about making. You're so right. Like come down to the strength of our relationships. And so what can white folks or the white community do? Like, I think a big part of it, and I'll like model it here too, like, is acknowledging your privilege. Like I have some amount of skin privilege because I'm not as dark skinned as some other Black folks. And so that's some privilege that I carry around. I have some degree of socioeconomic privilege. Like that's something else I have. And so being able to acknowledge like the privileges we have is like part of it. But I think like perhaps one shift I think like people could make, and I even heard it in that conversation you had with Ryan a little bit, he spoke to it, was this idea of like, try not to burden your friends of color or like, people in the, LGBTQ plus community, like, and asking them like to solve these problems, or asking them like to help you do this thing or whatever. Like, I mean, obviously like collaboration is important, but I think like really taking the time to like do some of that reflection yourself. I think like if we do that, we will have some idea, like each of us will have some idea about like what we could do initially. And that way that lowers the burden on like people who are already like experiencing like discrimination in some way, or have racial trauma or other identity trauma, having to like also do the work of educating white people. Like that is like tough. And I think the thing we can all do, of course, as I've said, I'm kind of like a broken record now, but is like do introspection. But certainly like in terms of like on a practical level for running, like look at your friends, like look at who you kind of keep company with. And if you have the opportunity at a race or a group run and you see a person of color, like go up and talk to them. Like that makes a big difference in terms of having folks feel included. Like slow your pace down and like jog with them. If you see someone finish at a race that looks different than you, go congratulate them and ask them how their race went. Just treat them like a runner, like, because I think that's what we all want, is to be like seen and valued and treated as runners, because that's like how we all connect in trail running is that. And so, I guess those would be like my recommendations. It's kind of been a journey for sure. And certainly like, the murder of George Floyd in 2020 was like really big for me, like confronting a lot of suppressed aspects of my racial identity, and caused me to dive a lot deeper into some of the nuances of what it's meant for me to grow up multiracial.
I think one thing that really stands out with both Ryan and Adam is just kind of their willingness to be vulnerable, and their willingness to, like immediately own up that they make mistakes as well. And I feel like that brings you into this sense of like being ready and willing to also do the work, to be self-reflective, to be vulnerable, to acknowledge when you make mistakes, to acknowledge when you have privilege. I thought that was really, really interesting and very, very grounding. And I'm wondering if this has spurred any self-reflection on either of your parts.
I think there's a lot of, similarities to the conversations we've had with Ryan, even back with Richard, right, kind of in the Strava piece with Patrick Prestgrove as well. And so, I think, and it always makes me introspective of like what I can do on, a daily basis or in my own community, right? Because I do think it kind of goes back to that. And I don't know. It's just, I think it goes back to just like not burdening people like Adam or, other people, but also just like taking responsibility on yourself to be, like almost like a welcome parade, right? Because like we all think this sport is awesome. And so I think it's like, we want more people to feel welcome and that they belong. And so that's something that I can definitely do at like any run or race or community event that I'm at.
And I'd say like that no action is too small was kind of the other thing I really pulled out of that too, was that just like, it might seem really minor to go up to someone and say hi, or to congratulate them on the race, or just to check in with them. Like we're all humans. That's not a big action. Like you can make a big difference, even just by like, I was out on a walk run today on a very busy path in Seattle because traffic was horrible to go to trails. And like, knowing that I like made someone happy just by like acknowledging their presence and like saying hi and smiling and being a human and being a good human goes a really, really long way in creating a welcoming community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think the best part of the trail and ultra running community, or the trail and ultra world, is the community, right? Like it's amazing. It makes you feel so loved, and it gives you the motivation to get to that finish line. And so we need to be able to spread that to everybody. And that's not a very hard task, because it's like so amazing to be there.
Yeah.
Slamming.
Let's slam. Sorry, guys. We're just rough transitioning here. We're making it through this rainy, gloomy, snowy day. Society Slam, my favorite segment of these podcasts, I feel like, in part because you all make our lives delightful, sliding into our DMs or emails or wherever you find us, because sometimes DMs don't work and that's okay. But it's brought to you by Oura Ring. They've got a new menstrual tracking algorithm that seems really cool. I know personally, I think I just noticed this recently, that my 48-hour prediction window has been really, really good, despite being on a progesterone-based IUD and having a very light period for the most part. Like very, very cool. And I've been digging my sleep tracking. I need a sleep tracker, and it pings me at 7 p.m., which is going to happen here in a couple hours. And I'm always like, hey, get off my back, man. You don't know me. Don't tell me bedtime's approaching. But then I'm like, oh, right. Winding down is important. So it's been something that I've really come to love recently, as it's been very dark and very gray here.
Yeah. And I just love that they've now made the period prediction mainstream on the app. And so it's right
you don't
front
have to
and
go
center.
Searching for it anymore.
All of your body temperature trends. Exactly. Mine has been super off this go around because I got really sick. And so I'm I can't tell if I'm supposed to get my period today or if it's just my body temperature is so high. Way higher than it normally does for the menstrual cycle.
Being a lady.
And my
so cool.
readiness score is 55. So
no.
Oh no.
That might be the lowest I've ever seen it.
It's cool. My heart rate variability didn't exist this morning when I woke up, and I was like, "Oh, that's bad.
Oh, geez.
Don't know what's going on there." Yeah, it's been a time. Okay, Keely, I know that we're butting up against your heart out, gotta go party with Mr. John Rea. We're not even spoiling it because this doesn't come out until after.
I know
the party.
It's great. I'm gonna have him listen to this, and he's gonna smile. But yeah,
slam away.
Slam away. So I don't have one, but I wanted to take this opportunity to, I actually just came off of some run camps. And it's so cool because I think this is a really cool way, I had a run camp, a few weeks ago in Colorado, and it was a really cool way. There's some people who were just newbies into trail running. And I think it's such a powerful way to kind of get into trail running, and people from all different backgrounds and ethnicities. So it was really cool to be a part of. And, so there's a few more run camps coming up. So I just wanted to throw it out there. There's some that are pretty far away, in Costa Rica in February, but some other ones in the Colorado area, and Palisade, Colorado in March, and Leadville, Colorado in July. I've partnered with a good friend of mine, Scott Jones, with Becoming Ultra. So you guys, Keely will link it in. Well, it'll be in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, I'll be at all three of those, and it's a cool way to come together and learn about trail running. So yeah.
I love it. Keely, slam away.
So I have kind of one that pulls at my heartstrings.
Oh no, mine's
really
too.
Just is yours. Is it the same?
No, probably not. Would that be hilarious if it's the same?
It might
again?
be.
Okay.
What's yours?
No, you go first.
Yours about an eating disorder?
No, not at all.
Okay. Cool. So I got a message from a listener talking about, having really tough time finding a gynecologist that understands her situation. And she's been basically dealing with an eating disorder for over 10 years and has been trying to slowly get back to a normal body weight, and has finally, reached the outskirts of the BMI curve, right? 18.5 on the dot. And now found a new gynecologist because they had to move. And that gynecologist is saying that it's totally fine. She doesn't get her cycle, that she doesn't need to worry about it, that she's a normal BMI, so she doesn't have to worry about the weight. And they're very confused as to why she has these questions. And so really just a call to action to those gynecologists out there and doctors out there that, you got to find out the bigger picture around your athletes. And this kind of story doesn't shock me, but it also breaks my heart because this is not someone who deserves to be told that they're normal and they're fine and that this is all normal. This is not normal. You need to be getting your cycle. And if you're not, then your medical staff needs to be working with you to help you get it back. And, I had a really great opportunity with my gynecologist recently. I just got a new one. She asked me how I felt about fueling. And she also told me that there are times where if I'm not fueling well enough while I'm training hard, I could lose my period. And that's not a good thing. That's the first time in my 30 years I've ever been told that by any doctor. So on one hand, optimism, on the other hand, not so optimistic. But yeah, just a shout out. But we hear you, we see you. I think that you deserve better than that and that you can shop around and find someone who will listen.
Yes. And there might be some resources out there too, through like Opal or some of these other organizations where you like can bring information with you into doctor's offices about like being weighed, which you don't have to be, et cetera. So there are things that I think Opal might have some. If not, we can probably find some for you. And I'm trying to remember what I did last year. Wow. Last like 2 weeks ago for Society Slam. But I don't think it's this one. So that's what I'm going to do. And it's a listener wrote to me and it made me cry. And I think it made them cry about just kind of like this reminder of like taking care of ourselves and how important it is. They had a big injury and it took a long time to get back from it. And then now that they're back into the swing of things and like they are running really well, it's really easy to take more on and say yes to too many things and not take care of themselves and slip back into old habits. And I was like, this sounds familiar. And that listening to me talk brought tears to their eyes. They literally parked on the side of the road mid-podcast to message me. It resonated deeply and reminded them that they need to stay and make space to stay healthy and be healthy. And that is real right now, like for so many of us. So take space, make space. Don't slip back into old habits. Remember that you have to take care of yourselves. We all need to hear that. So thank you to reaching out to us. Continue to reach out to us. You can find us on basically every platform. We're incredibly searchable these days, maybe more so than we should be, but slide into our DMs. We love hearing from you. And until next time, we will see you out on the trails.